Hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about stuff. If you're looking to secure and keep your cryptocurrency safe, there is an affiliate link for Ledger in the description below. I do not work for Ledger, therefore the affiliate link. I'm going to tell you something, and then I want you to react to it, and then I'm going to tell you what happened, and I'm going to tell you where I think we are. There's a really weird shift happening in the crypto space, in the Bitcoin world. I don't know where it's re-emerging from, but I'm happy about it. But I'm also a bit weirded out because it does spell economic doom. Hey, I know it's a little crazy. So, one of the original ideas when I first got into crypto back in 1855, somewhere around there, was this idea that Bitcoin was basically meant for us to get away from the old economic system. Fair enough and easy enough to kind of understand. When we used to see years ago in 2012, 13, 14, 15, whatever, if any country was in some kind of like an economic terrible situation, Bitcoin's price would go up. It would react positively to the idea that the fiat currencies are failing. Let's move money into Bitcoin. That kind of transformed into this idea of Bitcoin being like digital gold, something that governments and people and whatever could I was like, what other word is there? Could hold on to in times of economic problems. This shifted to 2020 when all markets began to collapse and Bitcoin did as well. One of the core principles of Bitcoin was that in moments of terrible economic stress, people around the world would begin to sell their assets and shift money into Bitcoin. Part of the excitement that I've had over the last few years is we've seen a dramatic uptick in the amount of people in Latin America, in Africa, and in Southeast Asia who have been getting into the cryptocurrency market. Why is this exciting? Because historically, they've been left out of the economic system. You know, rich people, I say it this way, banks don't like poor people. So hearing that Bitcoin was actually being used for its original purpose, to like bring people who are in dire economic straits, who are going through hyperinflation, 175% increases in their food, they were getting into crypto and it was literally saving them. The pushback kind of then began to be that Bitcoin was kind of only for the rich. I remember seeing someone say one time, and it was the weirdest thing in the entire world. He was saying that the idea of Bitcoin on chain, the main chain, the core, would be unchanged. That people, if you are trying to do any kind of a transaction for $1,200.34, you would do it on Lightning. And that the core, the main Bitcoin chain, would only be used by rich people who wouldn't mind a $128 transaction fee because they were sending $34 million in a safe and secure way. The idea of Bitcoin being used in everyday fashion all over the place, and we've gone over this before, for hyper-Bitcoinization, while lovely in practice, involves the literal destruction of the old system. You can't have Bitcoin at $38 million without the US dollar having lost 9 million% of its value comparative to Bitcoin. Like the one has to take over the other. As Bitcoin is incredibly finite, this is where you get this idea that technically Bitcoin's price could go up forever as long as more money continues to be printed. There's always a higher amount of money being printed, therefore Bitcoin comparatively could always continue to kind of etch its way a lot further up. We saw before years ago when a lot of other countries were kind of like scared of the idea of Bitcoin, they began to talk about banning it or heavily restricting it. We still have a lot of countries who were like, you can't use it as legal tender. You can't do this. You can't so and so and so. You have to like all these like reporting things. It's this idea of like, as long as we can have a hold on it and control over it, Bitcoin can't disrupt the current market system that we have. And then you get into people like BlackRock getting into Bitcoin. And then Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, recently said, if the United States doesn't get it together, Bitcoin is going to be the world reserve currency, which, I mean, completely blew me away because I was like, he said it out loud. We all knew it, but he said it out loud. And then there were like gigantic digital crickets everywhere because no one in crypto even seemed to actually care. For some reason, and I'm not sure if it's a sign of the times, I'm not sure if it's just the mentality that people currently have right now, but it feels like everyone's kind of expecting some kind of an economic meltdown or collapse that will then propel Bitcoin further into the spotlight. If you have a tinfoil hat anywhere around you, put it on. I saw something before basically stating that the only way that Bitcoin could really make it into the forefront of everything is with like a total kind of market collapse, where also even like rich people kind of were like, okay, the old system is garbage. Let's choose Bitcoin. You want to know what's weird and scary about that? Well, the ETFs purchased 1.5 million plus Bitcoin in just over a year. MicroStrategy's buying as much Bitcoin as they possibly can. We're hearing that the United States, as I stated, like, you have to think about this. Instead of literally putting those billions of dollars into anything else, they're talking about putting it into Bitcoin. We've had several that we know of, several central banks around the world who are all having discussions about Bitcoin and how good Bitcoin actually is and how Bitcoin keeps outperforming other assets. And then we find out that these central banks also own Bitcoin. You see where I'm going with this? If the old system is going to collapse and Bitcoin is going to take over, why are all the rich people buying all the Bitcoin right now unless they assume that the current market, the current system, fiat, can't take anymore and at some point is going to buckle? I told you, even as when you think about the idea of Bitcoin going to $1 million, do you want to know why that's significant? It's because that point, it takes over the valuation. Go away. Jeez Louise is like still on the stupid camera. At that point, it takes away the entire idea of what gold is. We've had gold for as long as we can remember in every history book, etc., as something that had value. The idea is that once Bitcoin does pass by the valuation of gold, it'll be considered completely passé. How did we ever invest in that as we continue seeing Bitcoin doing better and better? The thing about it is, and I'm telling you, I'm seeing more and more news like this, and keep your tinfoil hats on. I don't know if this is a signal or not. Remember how I told you before the whole BlackRock thing? Larry Fink was like, everyone should buy a lot of Bitcoin when it was 16,000, then it rushes up to over 100,000. Larry Fink recently said that the U.S. doesn't look like they're going to be able to pay off their debts. There's trillions of dollars of excess debt constantly being piled on top all the time that's never going to be paid off. And now we have discussions of the strongest economy on the planet buying up Bitcoin. BlackRock for the last couple of years with Fidelity being like, no, we need to get as much Bitcoin as we possibly can. The other side of it is the old system then has to break. And do you know what breaks when the old system breaks? Everything. Remember, this is about a month ago, we were discussing, sorry to make it so like serious in tone, but I'm just talking. Remember, we were discussing the idea of real estate. The idea of hyper-Bitcoinization basically goes, let's say Bitcoin's at $200,000 and the average home price is $300,000, $400,000. Pretty good investment for a home. Valuation begins to go up, but so does Bitcoin. At some point, Bitcoin passes by the valuation of the home, and then you have home buyers or home investors basically going, I could have put my money into Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes past $1 million, and in essence, it would mean that you could have bought Bitcoin for $200,000, made $1 million. You couldn't have done that in real estate, so therefore people would then assume that Bitcoin's going to continue to appreciate. They sell some of their investment properties, push that money into Bitcoin, but they've done two things. They validated Bitcoin and they sold off their property. Property prices then go down quite dramatically because they realize that all the properties that they own could have been here and made them 5x money. Bitcoin goes to $3 million and people go, well, the home I bought for $300K is now $475. What happens if Bitcoin goes to 30 million? I'll be able to 10x my money. They revalidate Bitcoin. They sell off their property. You kind of see where all of this is going. It ends up being the people who hold Bitcoin, the people who hold crypto, essentially make out like bandits. You figured out something a number of years ago that we've been talking about over and over that most of the world knows about but chose not to put their money into. You put your money into it, Bitcoin goes to $1 million, you look like a genius. And all you did was read the writing on the wall. You heard the largest companies on the planet say Bitcoin is it. You heard Larry Fink say the US dollar's end is nigh. Put your money into Bitcoin. Larry Fink said, and I hate to have to continuously say his name over and over. He said that at some point in the next 15 to 20 years, Bitcoin's market cap is going to take over the valuation of all real estate within the United States. Once again, he said all real estate in the US is Google it, is $50 trillion. He said Bitcoin's market cap will be above that. And then you have people in crypto shrugging and being like, well, Bitcoin's not at $1 million yet, so why should I actually care? And then we get 20 years into the future and you see what you could have done. This is one of those moments going back to me being younger. I can't be the only one who like thinks about being younger or like, kind of like what could have been kind of thing. If I was 20 years younger and someone told me like I wouldn't have understood as a teenager that I should be putting money into any kind of an investment. But now that I look forward and I'm like, especially now, like having all this knowledge that we have at our fingertips, our phones can access all the information and data that everything that humans have ever known. Have you ever thought about that? We literally have the world at our fingertips. Everything that humans have ever known and learned is on our phone. We can get it at a moment's notice. And then you have this information about crypto and people go, yeah. To finish off the thought, it is interesting that everyone has kind of circled back to this idea of not only Bitcoin being digital gold, but Bitcoin for some reason being like the thing that's going to like take us out of a recession, or that would perform well in the event of a recession. And the knock-on effect from that is who's buying all the Bitcoin? Who's buying all the crypto? Who's buying all the assets? Who's paying attention to the market movements? Who's trying to prepare for the future? Who's trying to get away from inflation? It's not 8 billion people. And that then shifts to a world where if you hold Bitcoin, you're part of the elite. If you hold crypto, you are one of the richest people on the planet. Like there's no discussion about it at any given point. You can do what you want, when you want, how you want at any given time over the course of the rest of your life. And this is, I think we're at the threshold of it. I thought it would take us a number of years to get to a lot of these points, to even consider hearing two governments being like, all right, we're going to actually get into it. I think that the floodgates have been destroyed, but the general public isn't seeing it or isn't hearing it or doesn't want to know about it. But I think also If you can be realistic, if you're dealing with $15 eggs, your rent has gone up by 300%. That's also part of the magic trick. How do you get people to not pay attention to the new world reserve currency? You make sure that only the rich pay attention to the new world reserve currency. Yeah, pretty crazy, right? Yeah, I know. And I mean, this is also, like I said, where I think we currently are. It's not a joke either. I don't mean this as like, like I think we are. It's been predicted for a long time. This isn't like, oh, blah, 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 I'm the first one doing it. No, like it's the demise of fiat currencies has been predicted since like the 80s, late 70s, literally late 70s, early 80s. But to actually witness it or like be a part of history, that's where I think a lot of people kind of get that question mark over their head. Because we're used to hearing about historical events, but when you realize that you're living through the end of the system that your parents went through and your grandparents went through, it seems a little bit unreal. To see all the news that we keep getting, all the information, all the data, all the accumulation, all the love that Bitcoin is getting from millionaires and billionaires, it'll make sense at some point to a lot of people. Like it'll be hindsight 2020 being like, oh, of course it was all going to work out that way. But yeah, the side effect is that the old system has to crumble. And this is what I think we're beginning to see. There are rumors of the debt ceiling not being raised within the United States. We know that the money is never going to be paid back in any capacity. The numbers only going to continue. This is why they keep raising the debt ceiling every year, to keep on taking more trillions of dollars worth of debt. At some point it buckles, and this is why I think all the rich people are rapidly rushing into Bitcoin. Yeah. I want to say interesting times ahead, but I think it's going to be more dramatic than anything for people not holding crypto. I still hold out a sliver of hope that soon we end up hearing that several billion people get into crypto, but wishful thinking never really helped anyone. Hope that you are all doing well. I hope that you all enjoyed. Hope that you all are having a great day. Morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.